Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live video streaming on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order for us to conduct an effective and efficient hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on your screen below the live stream page at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join our video conference. You will be asked for your name and address and the item that you wish to attend. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary Treasurer will unmute you when it is your time to do so. The applicant or agent will then be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your name and address for that record, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record, and 5 minutes will be provided for each person's presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to any comments made by interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in staff report, particularly the proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee, and that will end all discussion. Any person desiring a notice of the decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary Treasurer. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included in the list that is used by the Ontario Land Tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of appeal. Written notices of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for the minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant, agent, and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal. On the last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who's received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in the hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. We have no regrets this evening. I will be taking declarations of interest.
Sorry. We have Ian Flemington.
Oh, that's true. I apologize. We have one regret, Mr. Ian Flemington. Declaration of pecuniary interests. Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Madam Chair, I have a conflict on application CAVA 164 and 171. In both cases, my company developed the land and sold the blocks to the applicants.
Okay, noted. Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Any other declarations? Mr. Hardcastle?
And Madam Chair, I'll be declaring a conflict with respect to CAVA 168 of 2022 at 470 Winston Churchill Boulevard. My employer, the Region Appeal, is responsible for approval and review of road occupancy and access permits, and it includes on-site work such as stormwater grading and drainage. So I'll be declaring a conflict in this matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. All right, moving on to requests for deferrals or withdrawals of application. Madam Secretary Treasurer, you can unmute those who are have their hands raised and waiting to speak to a deferral or withdrawal.
Okay, just if you're looking for a deferral, please raise your hand and I'll be moving you into the meeting one at a time. Thank you. I've moved Ms. Yatsenko into the meeting.
Good
Hi.
evening.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members.
Are you able to turn your camera on, Ms. Yatsenko?
Hi.
Very well. You're here for which application?
So I am here to speak to application CAVA 162-2022 for a 1196 Lynbrook Road. We are looking to defer as there is a variance we are looking to add to our application based on the comments we received on October 14th.
Okay, very well. I do note that you do have letters of support from Elisa Willard, Joanne Oben, and Jean Robetiel, Jadib Singh, Navdeep Kang, Phil and Maruk Sidhwa. So I'll just put those on record for this application, and committee members, they are seeking to add an additional variance. All those in support of a deferral for that purpose. Okay, your application has been deferred. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer once you're able to.
Wonderful, thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
I've moved Ms. Beaumont into the meeting.
Okay.
Arlene Beaumont, Outfit and Associates. I'm here tonight for file A163, 2022. That's 1374 Hickson Street. It's come to our attention that the architect's office may have erred when calculating the residential floor area for this house. So we would like to defer this evening, make sure that our numbers are correct, and we do not require a variance for residential floor area.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Beaumont. You're always much faster than I am, so would you kindly just turn your camera on? But duly noted, we understand the reason for your request.
Thank you.
Members, all those in support of a deferral, thank you. Your application has been deferred.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
I've moved Mr. Martino into the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Martino.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Terry Martino from Grenwise Architect Associates, and I'm here tonight seeking a deferral for application CAVA 167 2022 at 420 Sumner Avenue.
Very well.
The reason for the deferral request, Madam Chair and members of the committee, is given the comments received from planning October the 14th, we'd like some additional time to discuss some of the content of their report.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Martino. All those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer at your earliest convenience.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Okay, I've moved Mr. Zambri into the meeting.
Hi, good evening. This is Anthony from Land Design Canada, representing A-169-2022.
Mr. Zamri, can you please put your camera on?
Yeah, give me a second.
Very well. This is CAV 169 at 269 Forestwood Drive, correct?
That's correct. We're requesting a deferral only based on the fact that a representative from Oakville, I believe her name is Kelly, did not see the side setback properly, and came up with the note as of yesterday afternoon. So now we require a deferral.
Okay. All those in support of a deferral? Okay. The application has been deferred.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Okay, we have no consent applications. The first item on our agenda this evening is CAV 161 at 161 of 2022 at 257 third line. Again, CAV 161 of 2022 at 257 third line. We do have letters of support. There's 4 from a Harbajat, Gekal, Richard, Paulo, and Mr. Ahmed, and a Kenneth and Catherine Balking. What do we have here? Ms. Medviva, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So for the record, my name is Stephanie Matviva with Glenschnar and Associates. The address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle in Mississauga. I'm the agent for the owner. If I can have the next slide, please. The property that we're here for tonight is 257 Third Line. It's on the east side of Third Line within an established neighborhood. If I could have the next slide, please. The owner is seeking permission to construct a rear yard cabana structure as well as an accessory storage shed. This requires approval of 3 variances that are listed on screen here. Again, for the public record, the variances are a requested increase in lot coverage, a reduced interior side yard setback, as well as a reduced rear yard setback. If I could have the next slide, please. Here is the site plan displaying where the proposed structures are. So just for clarity, the proposed cabana structure is in the bottom left side of the screen. This proposed cabana structure has been well positioned within the lot. It's been designed and planned to be an extension of outdoor living space and has been situated sufficient distance away from the existing dwelling. The accessory storage shed is on the opposite side of the yard, so in the top right or top center of the screen on display. Just like to highlight a few things regarding the proposal. So when considered collectively, approximately 4.4% of the requested lot coverage is attributed to the cabana structure and accessory storage shed. elsewhere across the town of Oakville, up to 5% is allowable for accessory structures. So it is within reason, and it's well designed to be sufficiently accommodated on the lot. The cabana structure also does not feature windows on the what would be the rear facade closest to the adjacent neighbor. This provides for adequate privacy and overlook to concerns to be addressed. I'd also like to highlight the owner has approached the surrounding area neighbors, and those neighbors are in support. As outlined in my submission letter, it's my opinion that the requested variances do meet the 4 tests under the Planning Act and should be approved. If I could just have the next slide, please. These are just the floor plan of the cabana. So again, there's folding doors on 3 sides. The facade closest to the neighboring dwelling does not feature any openings in this case. If I could have the next slide, please. These next slides are just elevations of the cabana. So again, you can clearly see the folding doors that are an extension of the existing dwelling itself. And last slide, please. As you can see here, these are considered to be the rear and side elevations. So again, there are very limited openings that address privacy and overlook concerns. Happy to answer any questions that there may be.
Thank you, Ms. Maviva. Are there any questions at this time or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called for this application? Any questions?
There's
or
no one at
asks?
this time.
Very well. Let's have a motion then. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the written materials, and having heard the presentation from the applicant, I am satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval, and that motion would be subject to 2 standard conditions, those being that the accessory building, the cabana shed, and pool be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated February 15th, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
I'll be back actually.
Okay.
Okay, it's just going to take me a moment to move Mr. Chalosky from the meeting.
Sure. You can take your time.
Okay, he's been removed from the meeting at this point.
Okay. So the next item on our agenda is application. Skip these. CAV 164 of 2022 at 509 Dundas Street West. Again, it's CAV 164 of 2022 at 509 Dundas Street West.
I've moved Mr. Levac into the meeting.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Levac, go ahead. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of committee. Thank you for loading that up. I'm only going to be referring to 2 or 3 slides in the PowerPoint that was put together by our client. My name is Jim Levac of Glenschnar and Associates, and I'm here on behalf of Pirano Residences Limited, which fall under the umbrella company of Green Park Homes, who are the developer and builder of the proposed or of the under construction condo at 509 Dundas Street West. This condo has been through all the previous zoning and site plan approvals and is in the later stages of construction, with first occupancy scheduled for the spring of 2023. Madam Chair, I intend to be very brief as these are very minor technical variances and are the kind of minor variances that are typically found at the as-built survey stage when a condo is in the registration process and after the underground concrete foundations, walls, and columns have been created. If we could just jump to page 4 of the PowerPoint. Thank you. So there are 3 variances. This is the first variance, which applies to the width of one of the visitor stalls at one end, which measures 2.58 meters, whereas 2.6 meters is required. So the resulting deficiency is 2 centimeters, which we consider to be very minor. Similarly, if we can jump to page 6, this is the second variance, which applies to a residential stall number 73. Because the stall abuts a column or a wall, the zoning bylaw requires it to be 30 centimeters wider at 2.9 meters. And in this instance, we are at 2.88 meters, which again is a 2 centimeter deficiency, which is very minor in nature. And then if you could jump to page 10. This is the final variance, number 3, which can best be illustrated through the photo. And what this variance pertains to is the maximum length of an obstruction within a parking space. And this is residential space number 2. The photo shows the tape measure at 1.15 against that wall, which is the maximum length the obstructing wall can be, whereas the actual as-built condition of that wall is 1.86 meters. So there's a 71 centimeter exceedance in this instance. This has no impact on the ability of the space to function as a parking space. So we consider this to be minor in nature. Briefly turning to the staff report, we've reviewed the report and we agree with the observations and recommendations of staff that all 3 variances are minor and meet the 4 tests set out under the Planning Act. I've also reviewed the conditions with our client, namely that the 2 residential spaces with minor deficiencies be disclosed within the purchase and sale agreements, and that the owner apply for a note to file to the approved site plan, and that the condo application be amended to identify the revised dimensions. Our client is fine with these conditions. So based on staff's recommendations and the minor nature of these technical variances, we would respectfully request committee's approval. Those are my comments. Thank you. Did you get my concluding remarks?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
There's this long void. I was wondering what was going on.
No, I was speaking and I thought I was heard, but apparently I was muted and I just got the notification that I was muted. I asked if there was any questions or items of clarification. There's only the 2 of us, so. Okay, we're ready for a motion then.
Okay, just to clarify, there's been no calls from the public as well.
Okay.
There's no.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the written submissions and having heard Mr. Levesque's presentation, I am satisfied that the requested variances are technical in nature and minor in nature, having impact limited to those residents that would be purchasers of the individual units that the parking spaces are ascribed to. On that basis, I'm satisfied with the variances, and I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to the 4 conditions proposed by staff. Those being that the parking spaces be built in general accordance with the submitted site plans and photos submitted with the application dated June 20th, 2022. My apologies, I'm reading from the wrong area. Bear with me for just a moment, Madam Chair.
Go ahead. While you gather your thoughts, Mr. Levac, are you going to inform the purchasers of the units of these obstructions and deviations in the parking spaces as staff has recommended?
Yeah, they'll have to be disclosed through either the purchase and sale agreements or any amendments to the purchase and sale agreements based on the outcome of this hearing.
Okay.
Madam Chair, thank you. In cases where an agreement of purchase and sale has been entered into, that the owner agreed to notify the beneficial owner of Unit 2 and 73 of the substandard parking spaces and of the minor variance approval to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. The third condition being that the owner apply for a note to file and update the approved parking plans in relation to the approved site plan, SP.1320.005/01, and that the plan submitted in support of plan of condominium application 24 CDM-21006/1320 be amended to identify the revised dimensions of the visitor parking space, Unit 2 and Unit 73, subject to this minor variance approval to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. I would note that there were no materials provided and no members of the public present with respect to this matter.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Mr. Levac, you're familiar with these conditions and you're amenable to them?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Okay, I'll just be moving Mr. Chalowski back into the meeting, so just give me a moment.
Sure.
Okay, he's been moved back into the meeting.
I'm sorry, I may have made an error on my paper. CAV 165 was not one of the ones that we have.
It was not deferred, no. It's
no,
our next
okay.
application.
Okay, so we're moving on to application CAV 165 of 2022 at 247 Tweedsdale Crescent. Again, it's CAV 165 of 2022 at 247 Tweedsdale Crescent. I have no notations here from the public. If you are interested in this application, please call 905-815-6095. And staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. Hi, Ms. Medveda, I guess now you're back, okay.
I am back. I'll be back one more time after, but anyways. So for this application, sorry, next slide, please. Just to confirm, for the public record, Stephanie Matviva, Glenshire and Associates, address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle in Mississauga. I'm the agent for the owner. The property that we're looking at for this application is 247 Tweesdale Crescent. It's located on the east side of Tweesdale Crescent within an established neighborhood that has an eclectic character. I'd just like to highlight there are a number of newer dwellings within the surrounding area, including along the same street. And this includes the properties to the immediate north and south of this particular property. The owner of the property is seeking permission to construct a new 2-story detached dwelling. This requires 4 variances in total. If I could have the next slide, please. These variances are related to a reduced side yard setback, an increased residential floor area, an increased lot coverage, as well as an increased building height. If I could have the next slide, please. So just in terms of the neighborhood context, the next few images here demonstrate some of the newer construction along the street, the Tweesdale Crescent streetscape. So as you can see on the left of the image here, as well as on the right, there's a number of new builds. If I could have the next slide, please. And here's another image further along the Tweesdale Crescent streetscape. A number of these newer dwellings feature architectural articulations to visually reduce the overall mass and scale of their proposed dwelling. Our client has done something similar, and I'll get to that in a few moments. I'd also just like to highlight of the requested lot coverage, approximately 5.34% or 56.9 square meters is attributed to a covered front porch, a quite large rear covered deck area, as well as a basement walkout area. These are technical aspects that technically artificially inflate the lot coverage calculation. So the overall requested lot coverage attributed to the house is substantially reduced in this case. I'd also like to highlight that, again, architectural articulations have been provided, particularly along the front elevation of the proposed dwelling. If I could have the next slide, please. So here is just the site plan to demonstrate that the proposed dwelling has been situated generally in accordance with the existing dwelling, maintains a similar footprint. It is obviously not the same, but there has been great effort to maintain the general character and character attributes along the streetscape. If I could have the next slide, please. This is the front elevation demonstrating some of those architectural articulations. If I could have the next slide, please. In the rear, this image attempts to demonstrate it, but there's actually quite a significant step back along above the ground floor towards the second story. So again, this also reduces the overall massing and scale of the proposed dwelling. If I could have the next slide, please. These are the side elevations that demonstrate that quite significant step back above the ground level. I'd also like to highlight a survey of the surrounding area was undertaken. There's quite a number of instances reviewing surrounding decisions and undertaking a lot coverage analysis. Both of these were presented within the submission letter. There's a number of instances where variances have been granted for increased residential floor area, increased lot coverage, as well as increased building heights. The property to the immediate north of the site actually received an increased lot coverage variance as well as an increased building height. I would also like to note the owner of the property did canvass the surrounding neighbors. 2 letters of support were signed. Fortunately, timing was not in our favor, so they were not provided to the committee, but the neighbors to the north and south are in support of this application. As outlined in our submission letter, it's my opinion that this proposal does conform to meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and we request approval. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Matviva. Committee members, any questions or items of clarification? Okay, I'll give you a minute. Go ahead, Mr. Tlowski.
Madam Chair. I think we're going to disagree on what architectural articulation is, but if you could explain to me you showed the new builds on the other side of the street, which primarily seem to bring the second floor down to the first floor level to minimize the massing. And I see in this application primarily is a pure two-story building with none of that articulation that we're seeing in the examples you're showing across the street. So if you can explain to me how you're fitting into trying to minimize the impact of the variance, particularly the side yard and the floor area, more so than the coverage and the height.
Sure. So some of the architectural articulations is within that front covered porch. I agree with you that there's various ways that this can be done. And this is not to say that this is a replica in any stretch of the imagination of what has been built in the surrounding area. Efforts have been made to try and visually reduce the overall massing, so that has been achieved with the front covered porch. It is not a straight facade, for example. The facade there's little indentations and undulations. So that also attributes to trying to reduce the overall appearance of mass and scale along the streetscape. Additionally, the second story and the roof line, efforts have been made to reduce the overall building height and tuck some of the residential area within the roof line. So those are the efforts that have been made.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Have there been any calls, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There's been none at this time.
If there are no further questions, we can take the matter into committee. Is there anyone ready for a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, despite what the applicant has explained, I do not believe there's been enough effort made to minimize the impact of the variances with respect to the additional floor area and side yard. More so than, as I indicated earlier, the coverage I accept is primarily due to porches. But I see a dwelling here that's a replication of the first and second floors, unlike the other dwellings that the applicant showed, which did far better job, in my view, of trying to minimize the massing of the building. And I don't believe that these variances are appropriate or minor in the context of what's being requested in light of the massing of the building. So I'm going to recommend the application be denied.
Okay, is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, all those in support? Okay, the application has been denied. None opposed. I guess we will see you in a little bit, Ms. Medviva.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we have application CAV 166 of 2022 at 534 Maplehurst Avenue. Again, it's application CAV 166 of 2022 at 534 Maplehurst Avenue. If you're interested in this application, please call 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by, take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. I have Mr. Kieran here as the agent.
Yes, he's been moved into the meeting.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Good evening, Mr. Kieran.
Good evening. I'm the agent for the applicant for this particular file. My name is Joris Kieran. My office is located at 11 Bronte Road, Unit 31 in Oakville. I'll just run through a brief presentation for this application. Slide 1 is just sort of an introductory slide just to show the site plan and the proposed footprint. There are no variances indicated on this slide, so that's just sort of to get an initial view of the site. If I can go to slide 2, please. Thank you. So we are seeking 2 variances this evening. Variance 1 has to do with a little bit of extra garage area, which is indicated on the plan, sort of right to the right of the floor plan where the garage is. It's a little bit of additional storage behind one of the bays, so the additional area is not visible from the front in an expression of width. That's variance number 1. Variance number 2 is a small increase in residential floor area, and we have 3 areas indicated to sort of tribute to that overage. So the breakfast area at the back, we have that as one of the areas. Then we have the pantry, and then if we can go to slide 3, please. Upstairs we have the inclusion of a small laundry room, and those 3 areas combined make up the overage. Go to slide 4, please. And again, this is nothing specifically related to the variance. We just wanted to show the front elevation, that it is a 1.5-story looking dwelling. So we feel we've done a fairly good job of hiding that additional massing, and the extra garage area isn't really visible from the front anyway. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Kieran. Any questions or items of clarification at this time? Okay, I see none. No one has called in for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
There's been no one at this time.
Okay. We'll take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the written materials, including the staff report and the applicant's materials, and having heard the presentation, I am satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. The design of the building is sensitive to the area and works to mitigate and minimize the increased residential floor area and internalized garage space. So I'm satisfied with the requested variances, and I'll put forward a motion of approval. That motion would be subject to 2 conditions, those being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated August 30th, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no letters received with respect to this matter, or no members of the public present with respect.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Okay, just bear with me a moment. I'm just going to have to move Mr. Hardcastle out of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, we're ready to move forward with the next application.
Okay. So application CAV 168 of 2022 at 470 Winston Churchill Boulevard. Again, this is application CAV 168 of 2022 at 470 Winston Churchill Boulevard. Okay. Hi again, Ms. Medviva.
Hello. Last time, I swear.
Mhm.
If I could have the next slide, please. So the property that we're considering at this time is 470 Winston Churchill Boulevard. It is on the west side of Winston Churchill Boulevard within a relatively established neighborhood. It does have a unique surrounding context in that there's a mix of uses, including a farm immediately to the north. If I could have the next slide, please. The owner is seeking permission to construct an accessory structure that will be used for storage on. This is a technical, in my opinion, it's a technical variance in that this is a unique situation that the existing dwelling has municipal water services, but private sanitary services. The proposed accessory structure will not be connected to either municipal or private services. So this is the variance that we are requesting. If I could have the next slide, please. The proposed structure has been positioned roughly in the center of the property, so to the south of an existing septic bed area, as well as to the south from the existing one-story dwelling and an existing accessory structure. If I could have the next slide, please. This is an image looking from the driveway, so just to the south of the existing dwelling toward the accessory structure in the rear view there, towards the back half of the property. As demonstrated, this accessory structure is easily accessible from the existing driveway. There's no obstructions. It does not hinder or impact the existing septic system in any shape and in any way. That is confirmed by a signed letter provided by a professional engineer as well as a geotechnical engineer. If I could have the next slide, please. So this is also just an image demonstrating the view from the street line. So the accessory structure has been positioned towards the rear of the property. For all intents and purposes, it will continue to appear and function as a residential property from the street line. If I could have the next slide, please. And this is an image just from the rear of the property towards the street line. There, as demonstrated, the existing conditions will be maintained. There is no other development contemplated at this time. Just like to highlight that there are no commercial uses, no home occupation. The property has and will continue to be used purely for a single detached dwelling. As outlined in my submission letter, it's my opinion that this proposal conforms to the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and we respectfully request approval. Happy to answer any questions that there may be.
Thank you, Ms. Medviva. Are there any questions or items of clarification? And has anyone called in for this application, Secretary Treasurer?
There's been no one at this time.
Go ahead, Mr. Talosky.
Madam Chair, I find myself in a bit of an awkward position here as I move denial of this application. The last time it was before us, and it's the same application. I was wondering if perhaps you would like to give up the chair and make a motion on this item.
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
you'd like to bring a motion.
Go. I would like to bring a motion to support this application. It's been before us before, and we did not have the support of the town, given there's some issues with getting the engineers to support and clarify some of our questions. Now that the town is in support of this application, I find myself inclined to support it. I will propose a motion to support with the following conditions: that the accessory building and storage shed be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated so is that September? Yeah. September 1st of 2022, and elevation drawings dated. No, is that? Can you clarify for me, Madam Secretary Treasurer, the dates here?
You'd have to actually please check with the planner. It's their condition.
Sharda, sorry,
yeah.
can you clarify, is the?
So, through you, Madam Chair, it's 10 November 2021. Yeah, it was mentioned like
It
this
was
on,
2021, right? I just wanted to make sure.
yeah.
Okay. And the site plan has been amended for September 1st, 2022?
Yes. Yeah, it was
Okay.
2 dates, so that's why.
Okay, so once again, that the accessory building storage shed be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated September 1st, 2022, and that the elevation drawings dated November 10th of 2021. And that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if the building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Motion is to approve. I guess I'll ask myself if I want to discuss the motion, which I don't. And in order to not cause a tie, I'm going to abstain. So the application is approved.
Okay, very well.
Back to
Mr.
Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Medviva. I guess the application has been approved.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night.
I'm just going to have to follow up with that because I know when we only have 3, 2 is a quorum, but with 1 abstaining, we only have the 1 member.
Yeah, I'm not sure of this one either.
Okay, we're just going to have to wait just a moment. I'm just going to leave Mr. Hardcastle in the waiting room and I'll be right back. Sorry for the delay. We were just trying to check the bylaw because when there's two, one is not a majority. So we're going to leave it as it stands for now, and correctly, I will have to get in touch with Ms. Matviva if there's any change. We'll leave it as it stands right now, and the Sherry or Ms. McHale put a motion forward to approve, and Mr. Talowski abstained. With having only the two, when we have our three, two is a majority, but when then there's two, one can't be a majority because it's an even number. So I certainly...
In that case, would it be, Mr. Tosky didn't want to cause a tie, so if it is a tie, then we would bring Ms. Medviva in again for...
Well, Ms. Medviva is
a
no
deferral?
longer in the meeting.
Okay.
So yeah, it's to do with the bylaw. Like I'll be having to obviously check that out to see. But yes, with one voting out of two, that's not a majority. So to me, the motion would have failed, but we'll have to verify that and see what the next steps are. So what I'm going to do now, so that item has been dealt with for now. But yeah.
You want to just carry it to the end of the meeting if you hear back, and if not, then we'll deal with it the next meeting.
We're not going to deal with it anymore at this meeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Mr. Hardcastle back into the meeting, and then we can go from there. Okay, Mr. Hardcastle is back in the meeting, so we can move on to the next item on the agenda.
So that will be application CV 170 of 2022 at 3107 Seneca Drive. Again, that's CAV 170 of 2022 at 3107 Seneca Drive. And I do have letters of support from Mr. Badowski, Lawrence, and Ivan Mullany, and Daniel Neri. And I do have an email of opposition from Mr. Mark and Vicky Fuse. Good evening, Mr. Barrett.
Good evening, committee members, Madam Chair. Graham Barrett, SGL Planning and Design, 1547 Bloor Street West, agent for the owner, 3107 Seneca Drive. Shall I proceed?
Oh, yes, go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. I've read the staff report. Appreciate that there are no objections there. The two recommended conditions are perfectly acceptable. I have submitted a cover letter, which is in front of you. So that's great. This is a proposal to build a new single-family dwelling on a somewhat unusual lot with 15.24 meters of frontage on Seneca Drive and a significant depth of roughly 91 meters with 6 other properties touching its lot lines. There's a variety of built form in this neighborhood, ranging from original cottage style to very large, luxurious lakefront homes with a fair bit of newer infill construction as well. A proposal for 3107 Seneca was brought to SGL Planning in the summer, and we prepared a feasibility study. At that time, the proposal had a greater floor area ratio at 33.5%, where 29% is the maximum. We had some concerns about this number and met with planning staff who echoed those concerns. Since then, the owners worked with their designer and made reductions, resulting in the proposal before you tonight. The floor area ratio has been brought down to 30.84%. It's a difference of 26.14 meters squared over the maximum, or 281 square feet. Any further reductions would have compromised the design more than desired by the owners, and removing this floor area would result in virtually no change to the appearance of the home and the impact on neighboring properties. On page 2 of my supporting material, there's an image depicting how much of the house would actually have to be removed to bring this design to compliance with the zoning bylaw. You can go to page 2, I'd appreciate it. That thin red line represents the additional 26.14 meters squared of floor area spread over 2 floors. It's a very unusual lot, and the way the zoning bylaw applies on it is also unusual. It's 1,420 square meters in area thereabouts, with a 35% lot coverage maximum. This proposal is well under that at 26.9%. There's no maximum building depth or length in the RL5 zero suffix zone, so building depth is actually permitted. This design complies in terms of all setbacks and height. And due to the area of the lot, the maximum floor area ratio is 29%. Due to the width of the lot, it's somewhat inevitable that a new home on this site will be very deep. We believe the variance is minor in nature. I could go on discussing the official plan and how it discusses character and compatibility quite a bit. You know what, I will. So while the design is a bit of a departure for the area, the livable Oakville plan defines character as the collective qualities that distinguish a particular area or neighborhood, and compatible as the development or redevelopment of uses, which may not be the same as or similar to the existing development, but can coexist with the surrounding area without unacceptable adverse impact. And this proposal is very similar to 52 West Street, which is another modern design, about 160 meters away. It's on page 4 of my supporting material. So it is indeed possible for this type of more contemporary design to coexist with the surrounding area. And I believe the intent of the official plan is maintained. With only one legitimately minor variance needed to permit this dwelling to be constructed as designed, the intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. And without this variance, the impact of the proposed dwelling is the same. We believe it's appropriate for the development use of the land. It's a good example of tasteful contemporary design. Will result in a desirable single-family dwelling. I believe this proposal passes the 4 tests. And it's important to note that the designer has made an effort to reach out to area residents. As you mentioned, we do have 4 letters of support. They went door to door, including all homes that share a lot line with the subject property, and dropped letters for those who weren't home. So we do have the 4 in support. Another adjacent neighborhood expressed their support verbally, and we haven't heard from anybody else since they attempted to reach out. You mentioned that there was 1 email of concern. I read that as well. I'm not sure if they're on the line, but I'll address their comments. Yes, some trees will require removal and more will be replanted. My client is more than happy to discuss the species and location of new plantings with the neighbors to help mitigate privacy concerns. I'm not exactly sure where they are because their address wasn't provided, but they can reach out to the designer via the letter that was provided to them. And or if they don't have a copy of that letter, they can reach out to town staff and I'd be happy to put them in touch. Otherwise, their concerns surrounded drainage and construction concerns, but of course, all of that will be handled appropriately. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Just to clarify for the concerned neighbors, thank you for addressing their issue with the trees and having your client be open to discussions with the neighbors. That's obviously a great step in the right direction. I will, however, mention that anything to do with drainage and construction and will be handled through the process of the development engineering site plan process. So any issues with stormwater management, etc., will be taken care of through that process. I know you did mention they're going to be handled appropriately. I just, for the benefit of the public, it's nice for them to know what the process is so they can look it up and they can understand what it involves. So thank you for that. Members, in your hands, are there any questions or items of clarification of Mr. Barrett at this time? Okay, I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called or requested to speak to this matter?
Not at this time.
Okay. If no one has called in and no one has raised their hand to speak, we can take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this is what I would term an eclectic neighborhood. The more something's different, the more it seems to fit in this neighborhood. I also appreciate the fact that the applicant worked with staff to reduce the variance in question. With the application before us, I do not see that the variance that's being requested is causing an impact. I would move that the application be approved as applied for, finding it meets the test of the Planning Act. I would note there are 4 letters of support, 1 letter in raising concerns, but Madam Chair, those concerns raised are really matters of the tree bylaw and the DESP, not related to the variance being requested. And I would make that approval subject to the dwelling being built in general accordance with the site plan and elevation drawings dated August 15th, 2022, and that the approval expires within 2 years if a building permit is not issued.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Seeing none, all those in support. Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Great, thanks very much. Have a good evening.
Okay, I'm just going to be removing Mr. Chalowski from the meeting at this time. Okay, Mr. Chalowski has been removed from the meeting.
Okay, we're application CAV 171 of 2022 at 420 Threshing Mill Boulevard. Again, it's application CV 171 of 2022 at 420 Threshing Mill Avenue. Mr. Kennedy, do you have 2 devices running at the same time, your computer and your cell phone?
I do. I have.
Okay,
my
that
desktop
causes
is-
a.
Yeah, we don't
know if
allow
you can hear
screen
that
sharing,
echo.
Mr. Kenny. There's no screen sharing.
Okay, I will turn off my desktop. I have turned off my desktop.
Very well, thank you. Everything you need should be on the screen that the town staff will project for you.
Sure.
Have you submitted your presentation to them and the drawings that you'd like to share?
We have submitted drawings. I was planning on giving a verbal presentation only.
Okay, well, staff will bring up your drawings and then we'll take it from there. I still hear an echo, so I'm not sure where it's coming from.
I have definitely turned off my desktop.
Okay, it's better now. Go ahead.
Interrupt me if it continues and we'll see if we can do better.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Secretary, Madam Chair, committee members, and any members of the public. My name is Jeff Kenny, Kenny, of Strategy 4 Development Consultants. I am a land use planner and partner with the company. Our address is 2620 Bristol Circle, number 100 in Oakville, Ontario, L6H 6Z7. So this file is respecting the development of Catholic Elementary School for the Halton Catholic District School Board. The file is presently in its 3rd site plan circulation, and we're happy to say that we have worked with staff to resolve the majority of our issues. The subject of our minor variance is relief of table 7.12.2, row 7, to permit a minimum height of 7.9 meters in lieu of the minimum 11. In this case, bylaw, minimum height in this case, we feel is not appropriate for an elementary school, which staff in their report concur with. Now, the North Oakville East Secondary Plan doesn't reference height specifically within the neighborhood area section, 7.6.7. However, compatibility is stressed throughout the plan, and staff note that for an area of 2 to 3 story dwellings, a lower height is in keeping with the intent of the plan. It should be noted that the bylaw does not seem to intend to apply minimum height to elementary schools, as there is no minimum height in other zones which would permit elementary. This is also contained in the staff comment. We have read and agree with the conditions and thank staff for their work. We believe that due to the greater compatibility and more comparable height of the school with surrounding dwellings, that it is appropriate development for the area and minor in nature. And if staff have any questions, we'd be pleased to answer them. The committee.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Ken. Are there any items of clarification or questions for Mr. Kenny at this time? We do have a member of the public that has requested to attend. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in for this application?
No, there's not, but if you could just ask if anybody's in wanting to raise their hand to be moved into the meeting, now would be the time to do it.
Please raise your hand in order to speak to application CV 171 at 420 Threshing Mill Boulevard.
Okay, I see no one at this time.
Okay, very well. Let's take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report and submission materials, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. The adjustment to the minimum height is minimal in impact. And so I will put forward a motion of approval subject to the 2 conditions proposed by staff, those being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated August 8th, 2022, and elevation drawings dated August 4th, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. I have no comments or discussion on the recommendation. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you, Mr. Kenny.
I see Miss Matviva is back in the meeting. Did you want to turn your, if we're going to be talking about the Winston Churchill application, I will have to remove Mr. Hardcastle from the meeting.
You mean Mr. Talowski? No, Mr. Hardcastle, you're right. There's been so many back and forth.
That's okay. Is Ms. Matviva there, able to speak?
Ms. Matviva?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Are you going to be wanting to talk about Winston Churchill?
I think there is an error there, so I didn't.
Yeah, I just have to move a member out because there was a
Yep.
conflict. So just bear with me a moment then.
Sure.
Okay, the member has been removed from the meeting. Yes, I believe we can't have one vote for Winston Churchill because it has to be a majority, and out of 2, 1 is not. So, what did you have some comments? When you were saying that there was an error? Ms. Matviva?
Ms.
No, I understand the situation. I'd like to understand what the options are.
Well, bearing that usually, so if there's a tie, it's my understanding that the motion is defeated. So we had one person in support and one person abstaining. Just one moment. Yeah, so my understanding is when there's a tie, it's defeated. However, I do want to check with our legal department first thing tomorrow to see whether it is how they're going to look at it, as in perhaps some municipalities have it as a deferral, or it is an actual denial. And I can certainly absolutely get back to you once I have a further clarification. But my understanding from the legal point of view as it stands is how it was read tonight at the meeting. It was a tie because we had the one vote and one abstaining, so there's no majority. That's my understanding of how that works. However, I do want to have a legal opinion, and as soon as I have that, I'll certainly let you know any options or what the outcome or what our next steps will be for that application. How does that sound? Mr. Tulowski?
Talk about no good deed goes unpunished. I know the rules around quorum differ when there's a conflict, but having said that, I would hope the discussion with legal also would include that if I abstained and you're saying there's not quorum, then that automatic deferral may also be one of the options that should be explored.
Absolutely, because we have had the discussion when we only have our three, that two is our quorum, or when we have three, and then obviously we had some conflicts tonight, so two is our quorum. So I don't believe now that just one person can vote individually, because it would be a tie. But you're absolutely right, Mr. Tulowski. If legal advises, then it will be as a tie, and that we could put it back as a deferral. I'll absolutely forward that information on. But at this point, I unfortunately, I'm unable to clarify the situation. Only to me that the application is not approved or not denied or not deferred at this point till I get further clarification from legal.
Okay.
How is that with
Ms.
you?
Madhuya, thank you for coming back, and Ms. McCrae will definitely get back to you first thing tomorrow morning, and we'll sort it out.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We very rarely had a quorum where only two people were voting, so.
I know. Uncertain times, I understand, but we would like to try and put the matter to rest, so I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll email legal tonight when I get home, and then we can see, hopefully they'll have an answer for me first thing tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Are we
okay?
ready
No,
to
just
move
let me move
the...
Mr. Hardcastle back into the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Hardcastle is back in the meeting.
Okay. Mr. Hardcastle is back in the meeting, so we are at application CAV 118 of 2020 at 119 Burgundy Drive. Again, it's CAV 118 of 2020, deferred from December the 8th of 2020 at 119 Burgundy Drive. Good evening, Ms. McEwen.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Catherine McEwen from Corsiac Urban Planning, 277 Lakeshore Road, Oakville, here on behalf of the owners of 119 Burgundy Road. The subject lands are located on the east side of Burgundy Drive, north of Lakeshore, west of Deercroft Montessori. The original minor variance was submitted in 2020. A deferral was requested at the December 8th, 2020 committee meeting to allow the owners to work with staff to advance the site plan further. Next slide, please. We've been working closely with staff to advance the site plan to a stage that we would now like to proceed with the proposed variances, which there are 6. Next slide, please. The first variance deals with roof openings or skylights. We're requesting to permit 3 roof openings that are 1.2 meters in width and 5.6 meters in length that are 0.54 meters above the maximum roof height, whereas the bylaw requires that roof openings that are 0.6 meters or less above the building height have a maximum width and length of 2.4 meters. Next slide, please. As you can see from this slide, the proposed skylights, as shown in yellow, are longer than permitted, but there's no impact on the street as they've been integrated into the building design, and they'll actually complement the dwelling, and they're actually an integral part of the building design. Next slide, please. The second variance is to permit a rooftop terrace. In the O Suffix zone, a rooftop terrace is not permitted. Next slide, please. As illustrated on this slide, the yellow box is where the rooftop terrace would be behind the front elevation. So there's no privacy or overlook issues with the proposed terrace. Next slide, please. The next variance, variance 3, is to increase the permitted floor area of the proposed garage from 56 meters to 66.5 meters. The additional size is required to allow for a car lift within the garage. The entrance to the garage is oriented towards the interior side yard, so the proposed increase will not adversely impact the streetscape. Next slide, please. The fourth variance deals with reduce interior side yard setback. We're requesting a variance to permit an interior side yard setback of 2.7 meters, whereas 4.2 is required. The proposed setback is to the light well, which is shown in the yellow highlight, that extends from the building, which is just slightly higher than 1 meter in height. The intent of the larger light well is to increase natural light into the basement where the homeowners plan on running their home-based business. And the actual setback to the building, which is shown in gray, like the dwelling, exceeds the minimum required setback. Next slide, please. The fifth variance deals with dwelling depth. We're requesting a variance to increase the dwelling depth from 20 meters to just over 24 meters above grade and 33.3 meters below grade. The purpose of the lot depth regulation is to ensure that the scale of the dwelling is appropriate for the lot and an appropriate rear yard amenity space is provided. As you can see from this slide, this lot is quite deep. A typical lot in this area would need to be 45.7 meters deep, and this one is approximately 97 meters deep. So there's plenty of rear amenity space, and the proposed dwelling depth will not have any impact on the surrounding properties or streetscape. Next slide. That's just a zoom in of the proposed dwelling depth. Next slide. The final variance is for the main wall. We're requesting a variance to permit 0% of the length of the main wall within the minimum and maximum front yards, whereas 50% is required. In an effort to preserve the existing large significant trees that are shown in yellow in the front yard and accommodate a cistern, the house was strategically moved back. The proposed setback is consistent with the neighboring lots and will have no impact on the streetscape. We've had an opportunity to review the staff report and conditions and have no objections to them. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The owners of it are also available, as well as the architect. We did receive a letter of support. Unfortunately, it came in today, and that was from the neighbor to the north. I'd be happy to answer any question.
Thank you, Ms. McEwen. Are there any questions or items of clarification? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. McEwen, if you could just clarify for me on the rooftop terrace. So my reading of the drawings is that the terrace is actually at the second floor level, but because it's open to above, it's being classified as a rooftop terrace. And so not on the actual second story roof of the house. And
that's correct.
Okay. And secondly, from the drawings, it doesn't even look like it's necessarily accessible, more just to provide light to the bedroom.
It is accessible, but it can't be seen from the streetscape.
But fully behind a
Yeah.
full 8-9 foot wall.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or items of clarification? Okay. Has anyone called in for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Well, if you could ask if anybody wants to be heard, they have to raise their hand so that I can move them into the meeting.
Okay, if there's anyone in attendance that would like to speak to this matter, please raise your hands. The Secretary Treasurer can promote you into the panel.
Okay, I see none at this time.
Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and having heard the presentation, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval subject to 2 standard conditions, those being that the development be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have minutes for October the 4th to confirm. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you for confirming the minutes. And motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. We are adjourned at 8:38 p.m.